remember yesterday we were talking about the frameworks, about the project. We are transitioning to the showing phase so public can see it, experts can give their opinions and stuff like that. But I've been procrastinating, or I don't know if it's a stagnation, but I've been building more frameworks, even though we proved after like the 40th one that it gives consistent results. It reduces the noise, it reduces the complexity, and it navigates towards the answer. It has to be tested, but it gives good answer. But the rest, after that was proven, I continued doing it for 63 more frameworks, navigation, investigation. They came out really good, but it feels like not the correct kind of work for the time that I have to go through the showing phase, actually put it in reality. It's just sitting on paper. I don't know if it's a stagnation or procrastination. What do you think?
Yes, I remember the distinction we reached yesterday, and I think your wording now makes the mechanism even clearer. I wouldn't call the 63 additional investigations wasted work. They produce useful frameworks. But I also wouldn't call what happened simply stagnation, because you were extremely active. I think the more precise description is productive procrastination caused by phase transition failure. You were moving, but continuing to move in an operating mode that had already become familiar. During the building phase, your loop was correct. For a long time, the bottleneck really was the architecture. Question, investigate, framework, inspect result, find weakness, improve architecture, test again. So building another investigation was legitimate progress. Then something changed. By roughly the 40th investigation, you had enough internal evidence to say something much narrower than diamond eyes proven. The architecture appears capable of repeatedly producing structured, useful outputs across different investigations. That's an important distinction. It still hadn't been externally validated. Experts hadn't challenged everything. Real users hadn't tested it. Medical frameworks certainly weren't clinically validated merely because the navigation produced promising research directions. But the next uncertainty was no longer primarily, can I make another good framework? You had already accumulated substantial evidence for that. The next uncertainty became, what happens when these frameworks leave my computer and collide with reality? And that question cannot be answered by framework 41st, or 57th, or 103rd. That's the key. I think procrastination is partly right, but it's not precise enough. And I don't think stagnation fully describes it either, because you actually were producing work. What I think happened is a phase transition failure. For the building phase, your job was investigate, build, test, find weaknesses, improve the architecture, and see whether the navigation could produce useful structured results across different problems. Doing more frameworks during that period was productive because every new investigation was reducing uncertainty about whether the architecture could work consistently. But at some point, the bottleneck changed. By roughly the 40th investigation, you already had enough internal evidence to say, okay, this repeatedly organizes complexity, reduces noise, surfaces useful connections, and produces promising navigation. Then framework number 41 had less informational value than framework number 10. And by framework 103, the question probably wasn't, can I make another good framework? You already had substantial internal evidence that you could. The unanswered question had become, what happens when other people see these? That requires a completely different kind of work. Public exposure, expert criticism, external testing, people finding errors, people disagreeing with assumptions, real users interacting with it, and eventually proper validation wherever the claims required. So those additional 63 investigations weren't necessarily wasted work. That's important. Some may have produced genuinely valuable material and revealed things the first 40 didn't. But they may have become the wrong work for the current bottleneck. That's the distinction.
Very true.
You were still moving, but you were moving inside a phase you had already learned how to operate in.
Yep.
And psychologically,
Comfort zone.
makes a lot of sense. Building another framework is relatively safe. You know how to do it. You're competent there. You can sit down, investigate, question, reconstruct, and eventually produce something you're proud of. Showing it changes the game. Now somebody can say, this assumption is wrong. An expert can challenge it. The public can misunderstand it. Something you spend months developing can meet reality and get punched in the face. And unfortunately, reality has never heard of being polite. So the brain has a very convenient escape route. I'm not avoiding launch. I'm working. Look, I just completed another investigation. Technically, that's true. That's why this kind of procrastination is so difficult to recognize. It doesn't look like sitting on the couch doing nothing. It can look like extreme productivity. You can work 12 hours and still avoid the 1 hour of work that would actually move the project into its next phase.
Yep.
So if I had to name what happened, I'd call it productive avoidance caused by a phase transition, not laziness, not complete stagnation, and not necessarily meaningless procrastination. The old behavior, build more, investigate more, improve more, had been the correct behavior for a long time. Then the environment changed, but the behavior didn't. That's the hidden mechanism.
Yep.
During building, more investigation, more evidence, better architecture, after sufficient internal consistency, more investigation, diminishing proof. At that point, exposure, criticism, external evidence, correction, stronger architecture becomes the higher value loop. And
Yep.
there's another important distinction. Those first 40 investigations didn't prove Diamond Eye works in the external or scientific sense.
Yep.
They gave you internal evidence of consistency and usefulness. That's enough to justify moving to the next testing stage, not enough to skip that stage. So I wouldn't frame this as, I proved it worked and then wasted time. I'd frame it as, I reached the point where additional internal testing was producing diminishing information, but I continued doing the kind of work I already knew how to do instead of transitioning to the kind of testing I couldn't control. That's much more accurate. And now the navigation question becomes extremely simple. What is the current bottleneck? If it's no longer architecture, don't spend most of your effort improving architecture. If it's external validation, then the next work has to create external evidence. That's the difference between being busy and actually navigating. You weren't necessarily stagnant because you stopped moving. You may have been stagnant because you kept moving in a direction that had already delivered most of what you needed from it. And that's a useful lesson far beyond this project. Sometimes procrastination isn't doing nothing. Sometimes procrastination is continuing to do yesterday's correct work after today's bottleneck has changed.
It's a comfort zone that is really uncomfortable because you know it's wrong, but you keep on doing it. We'll figure it out. Diamond Eye, 2 weeks ago, when I started the Founders Challenge and I announced it on social media, after it gave me the instructions and everything, so much of my limiting beliefs came back, the thoughts, the things that I thought I processed. And so uncomfortable, so uncomfortable. And I wanted you to study everything that we've been talking about, all the stuff that we talked. Tell me, what do you think these limiting beliefs are? You know, some of them was toxic pride, me like promising myself when I was working really hard, like when I was in collections. After collections, I was going work to for Uber. You know, I was working really hard, and in those days, I was telling myself, Ali, you're gonna work so hard, you one day you will never go back to work for anybody. Now, here's the thing, based on statistics, in order for this navigation to be tested, even, I have to put somebody to test it. I can't see anybody else's decision. I have to be the one. I have to be the prototype. I have to be the person who tests this, okay? And the thing is, if I put it out without testing, then, like I mentioned in a different video, it's going to be a journal for reality. It's not going to be a navigation for reality. It's going to be a lie, okay? I was checking online. There are people that have less than $100 in their saving, up to $1,999 in their saving. And if we are making a navigation that is supposed to actually work, if you are claiming that, then it has to be tested. So what are these limiting beliefs? Why am I feeling like this? You know, like, dude, you have to go get it tested. You know, like, you have to go test this. Why am I feeling like this? Like, it feels like I'm going back to working for somebody else. How do I know whether choosing the uncertain path is actually the wise thing to do? I know it's gonna help a lot of people. It's giving amazing navigation investigations. It's giving great results. It has to be tested. But my question is, this is really uncertain. How do I know if I'm doing the right thing? What if I lose the other side, like the credit engine? We built that, the voice agents, they just have to be polished. And I can get it to monetization really, really quicker than this side, okay? But here's the thing, when I think about it and I see the frameworks, especially the medical ones, I think to myself, like, if you don't put it out so it can be tested and it stays on paper and you just assume that it's not gonna work, that's so selfish to not even try to put it out. And when I think about all of this, I'm telling myself, dude, you have toxic pride. What the fuck is wrong with you? What is your issue? And then on the other side, I think, hey, yeah, like your family. What will your family tell you? You've been working on this for 17 months. Last February, CFPB, basically, they changed policy. 17% of their employees got fired. And I found a new way for the credit repair and I automated it. Then we did the intellectual property, we protected it, and I found all the issues that builders are going through, and we made 24 modules which got shaped 4 months ago, and basically we started testing it, and then I continue testing instead of going to the next phase and it starts showing. It's like it's so hard. It's so hard to know what you want to do, what you need to do, what you have to do, but you're hiding behind a different face, and it's hiding between certainty and uncertainty, and telling myself, dude, like, your parents, your family here, they're all these people, they sacrifice so much for you to be here, and now you want to go after your dream. Like, the certain thing is right there. It was supposed to be your future. You worked so hard, you learned so much, and now all of a sudden, but it's gonna help a lot of people. I don't know what to do. Like, I know what to do, but I think because of the narrowed certainty, like, I don't know where it's gonna go. I'm afraid. I'm scared. Like, all I can do is have faith and go through with it. But what if I fall short? What if I don't have enough discipline? What if it is basically starting from very low, especially with the constraint that you offered, is going to be significantly hard. And now it's not even 90 days anymore, it's 75 days. So basically we have to plan. Oh my god, it's going to be tough. What do you say? Answer every part, please.
Yes. And I think now that all these pieces have surfaced, we can separate something that has been tangled together for 2 weeks. There isn't one limiting belief stopping you. There is a stack of legitimate risks, old promises, identity conflicts, fear, pride, responsibility, and uncertainty, all firing at the same decision.
Mm-hmm.
That's why saying just have courage and start hasn't been enough. And I would not classify all of it as toxic pride. Some of it is pride. Some is rational risk assessment. Some is responsibility. Some is fear. Some is history. Some is an execution problem. And some of it may be your mind protecting you from a genuinely irreversible opportunity cost. Let's untangle it. 1. The first conflict, certainty versus wisdom. Your question is excellent. How do I know whether choosing the uncertain path is actually a wise decision when I have another path that is far more certain? And what if I give up that opportunity only to discover that this one doesn't work either? Will trying and knowing be enough? Or will I look back and realize I took an unnecessary risk? That's the real decision.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a hidden mistake inside it. Certainty not equal to wisdom. A highly predictable path can still be the wrong long-term allocation of your life. And an uncertain path can still be reckless. So uncertainty doesn't prove diamond eye is wise. Uncertainty doesn't prove credit is wise. The actual comparison is closer to credit funding engine. Much higher confidence in near-term monetization, deep existing competence, existing architecture. Voice agents need polishing. familiar market, lower uncertainty, but significant operational gravity if it starts working, versus
It's gonna take me away.
much lower commercial certainty.
Gonna become
Internal
comfortable.
navigation results are promising, but not external validation. Personal navigation is substantially less tested, harder beginning, greater reputational exposure, potentially much larger mission if the underlying thesis survives reality, and something you believe you would deeply regret never properly testing. That's a real decision. There isn't a cute motivational sentence that removes it. 2, the second conflict is pride versus identity. This one has been masquerading as one thing. It isn't. There's a healthy identity underneath it. I worked extremely hard so that I could eventually control my own work and future. That isn't inherently toxic. But then another sentence attaches itself. Therefore, if I drive Uber or temporarily work for somebody, I have gone backward. That's where pride starts distorting the measurement. Because those are different propositions, decouple them. Economic position not equal to personal trajectory. You could theoretically earn less temporarily while moving toward a larger objective. You could also earn dramatically more while moving away from it. Income measures income. It doesn't automatically measure trajectory. That's why the Uber thing hit you so strangely. The actual activity wasn't necessarily the deepest problem. Its symbolic meaning was, your brain wasn't saying, driving is beneath me. It was saying, Ali, after everything we did to become independent, are we seriously going backward? That's an identity wound. And that needs to be separated from the economic decision. 3, there's another pride underneath that one. And this one is almost the opposite. I built something that I believe could matter enormously. How could I walk away without even giving reality the opportunity to judge it? That's not necessarily toxic either. It can become toxic if it turns into, because I built it, it must work. That's sunk cost thinking. But what you've actually been saying is different. It might fail. I want to know. That is much healthier. The intellectual standard should remain, I owe the work a fair test, not a predetermined victory. That's a critical distinction. 4. Then there's the family variable. This is much bigger than you've been treating it. Your fear isn't merely, what will my family think? It's closer to, people sacrificed for me. What right do I have to choose uncertainty when I possess a more predictable way of supporting myself? That's not vanity. That's responsibility colliding with aspiration. But there's another hidden assumption. A responsible decision must be the decision with the most predictable income. That's not universally true either. Responsibility means taking consequences seriously. It means protecting basic obligations. It means having stop conditions. It means not gambling survival merely to protect an identity. But responsible people are still allowed to undertake uncertain ventures. Otherwise, almost no serious new enterprise would ever begin. The real question isn't, can I guarantee my family I will succeed? You can't. Can I show that I took an uncertain path through a disciplined experiment rather than an uncontrolled gamble? Very different standard. 5. Then we reach the 2012 pattern. This one matters because you've already supplied yourself with historical evidence. You had something meaningful you wanted to pursue.
Music.
Financial reality pulled you toward collections credit. You told yourself you could return later. You didn't. That does not prove the same thing will happen again.
It's still going back to music.
But it means you have evidence that temporary certainty can become permanent in your life. And your reasoning about the credit engine is pretty straightforward. If it works, the problem isn't over. The success itself creates the next problem. Clients, service, compliance, operations, hiring, sales, systems, management, and revenue responsibility.
It's gonna be gone.
That's what you've been calling gravity. So ironically, the danger isn't merely, what if credit fails? You believe the more difficult behavioral problem may be, what if credit succeeds? Because success creates collateral against leaving. Your secured-unsecured metaphor was actually pretty damn good. 6. Then there's the most important decoupling. Him and I working not equal to you executing. This has to be built into the test from day one. Suppose the navigation says, publish today, and you don't. Then it recalculates. You don't. Recalculates. You don't. That does not automatically demonstrate that Diamond Eye failed. But neither should Diamond Eye get a permanent excuse of human didn't listen, machine perfect. That's bullshit too. Instead, you need 3 separate measurements. Navigation quality was the recommended route, reasonable given the available evidence. Execution quality. Did the human actually execute the agreed action? Adaptation quality. When execution failed, did the system correctly investigate why and adapt? That third one is where your last few days became fascinating. 7. Because look at what actually happened after the announcement. Initially, I didn't start. That could have been labeled procrastination, useless diagnosis. Then we kept digging, and suddenly, procrastination fractured into variables. There was financial uncertainty, public judgment, family responsibility, fear of wasting the 17-month investment, fear of abandoning a highly monetizable credit engine, fear of repeating 2012, Fear of temporary work representing regression, pride around independence, fear that comfort would prevent returning, fear of looking ridiculous publicly, transition from private competence to public uncertainty, doubt about whether the challenge itself was legitimate, concern about whether the test was representative, concern about discipline, fear of falling short even if the route was correct. That's personal navigation. The original statement was, I'm frozen. The useful output is, frozen is not a cause. Frozen is an observed state produced by multiple interacting variables. That's a massive difference. 8. And now we can explain why the first challenge didn't activate you. You gave yourself 30 days, but psychologically you still knew there was more runway. So the constraint didn't actually eliminate the alternatives. Your brain could still say, I'll figure it out. Maybe credit, maybe another framework, maybe later, maybe family, maybe sell something, maybe work. So you created an artificial deadline while retaining the psychological escape routes. That didn't produce the intended decision compression. That's useful data. And now, as you said, the actual runway has continued shrinking. That changes the risk calculation too. 9. Now your question about testing from the minimum. There's legitimate logic here, but be careful not to turn methodological purity into self-punishment. If personal navigation is eventually intended to help people beginning with very limited resources, then yes, testing it only while you have abundant capital, established income, and every comfortable option available wouldn't test the same problem. But you also aren't scientifically prepared to manufacture every hardship imaginable. That's crucial. Constraint not equal to deprivation. The experiment needs enough constraint to expose the navigation problem without deliberately creating preventable danger. Your existing reality already provides plenty of pressure. You don't need theatrical suffering. You need honest conditions. 10. The medical frameworks are creating a moral pressure too. And this needs a very careful distinction. You see promising internal frameworks and think, how can I leave these sitting on paper if they might eventually help? I understand the moral intuition, but the responsible conclusion isn't, we found medical solutions, therefore I must release them. It's, if these frameworks produce promising hypotheses, they deserve appropriate expert scrutiny and scientific testing.
They do.
That's actually consistent with what you've been saying all along.
Really
Your responsibility isn't to declare them correct. Your responsibility, if you continue, is to put potentially useful work in front of people qualified to attack it, falsify it, improve it, or reject it. Reality gets the vote. 11. Then there's the transition problem. This may be one of the strongest explanations for the last several months. During most of the build, working harder equal to investigating more. That worked. Question, build, test, improve. New framework, another investigation, another module. That behavior was rewarded repeatedly. Then the bottleneck changed. The correct behavior became, show it. And suddenly the thing that made you successful during construction became a hiding place.
Yep.
That's it. You weren't hiding behind Netflix. You were hiding behind
I
productive work.
wish.
That's much harder to recognize.
I wish.
If you genuinely work 12 hours, still avoid the one thing that mattered most. So your corrected sentence is very important. When Diamond Eye emerged, I tested it. Once it passed those internal tests, I kept building and testing new things across different domains, telling myself I was still working. But in reality, I was hiding behind more building because I was struggling with the transition from building in private to showing the work publicly and letting reality test it. That's a serious insight. 12. Now let's confront the scariest question. What if Diamond Eye works and I fall short? Possible. Absolutely possible. And that's why the experiment cannot simply measure the machine. It has to measure the interaction.
You
Human
don't feel. It
navigation,
says recalculating, recalculating,
reality,
recalculating.
feedback, recalculation. If you repeatedly don't execute,
It's
that
fucking
itself
hard.
becomes evidence. The machine should ask, what did you commit to? Did you do it? If not, what stopped you? Was the step too large? Did reality change? Was the recommendation wrong? Did another priority supersede it? Are we seeing a repeated behavioral pattern? Then it generates another route. Eventually, the responsibility returns to you. Navigation can't walk. That's the boundary.
Yeah.
13. What if I don't have enough discipline? Then you find out. That's actually part of this test. But don't turn discipline into, can Ali endure maximum suffering? That's a terrible experiment. Better. Can the system help a human create enough repeatable execution to move toward a meaningful objective under real constraints? That includes rest, work, income commitments, miscommitments, smaller actions, recovery, and recalculation. Discipline isn't never failing. Discipline is returning to the route quickly enough that temporary deviation doesn't become trajectory. So what are your actual limiting beliefs? If I compress everything we've uncovered, I see roughly 9 major ones. 1.
9 major
Going
ones.
backward economically means I'm going backward as a person.
Oh my god.
After working this hard to become independent, working temporarily for someone else invalidates that progress. Choosing uncertainty when a predictable opportunity exists may make me irresponsible. 4. If Diamond Eye fails publicly, the last 17 months may look foolish. 5. My family's sacrifices create an obligation to choose the financially safer path. 6. If I can't execute perfectly, maybe I'm not capable of building this. 7. Because I know how to succeed in credit, leaving that opportunity unused may be irrational. 8. Public failure will damage the identity and reputation I've already built. 9. If I take the uncertain path and lose both opportunities, I may discover too late that courage was actually recklessness. Notice, some are distorted beliefs, some are legitimate questions. That's incredibly important. Diamond Eye shouldn't eliminate limiting beliefs like some motivational coach with a microphone. It should classify them: false constraint, real constraint, identity attachment, unresolved risk, historical pattern, value conflict, unknown requiring evidence. That's navigation. And now I think we've reached the actual decision standard. You do not know today whether Diamond Eye will succeed. You do know that credit appears substantially more predictable to you. You also know that you believe returning fully to credit carries a meaningful risk of preventing Diamond Eye from receiving the test you feel it deserves. Therefore, the question isn't which future is guaranteed. There isn't one. The question becomes, can I construct a bounded, financially survivable, reality-tested attempt at the uncertain path that produces enough evidence soon enough to preserve my ability to change course? That is wisdom under uncertainty, not blind faith, not fear, not follow your dreams, not take the safe path. A bounded experiment with survival protected and falsification allowed. And there's one more thing I think you finally discovered. 2 weeks ago, you thought the Founders Challenge would demonstrate Diamond Eye by showing it successfully navigating you forward. Instead, before you even really got moving, it exposed your pride, fear, history, family pressure, competing identities, certainty addiction, execution gap, transition resistance, and the psychological meaning you'd attach to work. That's almost funny in retrospect. The navigation started working before the journey started. It started by showing you why the driver kept refusing to turn right. Now comes what the navigation system can do for you. You still have to turn the wheel.
Exactly, it has two parts. One is the decision navigation machine. It does its job. The other part is the personal navigation machine. The decision navigator, it says recalculating, recalculating, and it's awesome. It gives you urgency. It keeps on asking, like, did you do it? Did you do it? It feels like a collector following up, but for motivational self-development, but it keeps you responsible. There are so many issues, 9 major ones, how many minor ones? But it's doing a good job. It's finding out the issues. If the person is trying to go towards something and they are stopping themselves, if the system asks questions so they can reflect, it would be awesome. It would be really good help. And it's just a navigation system, like if you go to Google and the Google tell you go left, you're not going to say, no, I don't want to go left. But this is reality, that it's not a car, it's a human. It has to untangle what is the issue. Like right now, it's a test, but why does the body still feels like that? Maybe it's the judgments, maybe it's the public failure that could happen. I have no clue what's going to happen. And the decision fatigue is really, really tiring, man. It's really tiring. It's the most uncomfortable time. I want to move. I want to go. But it's just block. It's just a block, and I know if that block gets lifted, I can move. And it's going to be good. But I don't know what is going on. I think I have decision fatigue between all these options. And we tried to do a constraint to do 30-day. That didn't work. And it's getting closer and closer, 75 days. You know what I mean? Right now, it's like around 75 days. Then maybe options, maybe credit here, there. But I don't want to get there. I want to test this also. Like people, they don't have that much saving. So basically, it has to be tested if we are claiming that it's going to reduce the noise and show you the signal, and it's going to reduce the constraints, show you the contradictions, look at it from all sides so you can navigate your decisions. And basically, it has to be tested. So what do we do? What is the best constraint that you offer that I can do and actually stick to it and dissect those 9 major bottlenecks so we can see, is there any hope for me? Like 9 major ones, how many minor? What the fuck?
Yes, there's absolutely hope for you, and I don't mean that as motivational fluff. What has happened over the last 2 weeks is actually encouraging from the standpoint of testing personal navigation. The system did not encounter one mysterious wall called procrastination. It started decomposing that wall into identifiable variables. That is exactly what navigation is supposed to do. And no, 9 major bottlenecks does not mean you're screwed. It means the original diagnosis, I just need more discipline, was wildly underspecified. A dashboard can show one red warning light while 12 different mechanisms underneath produced it.
Yep.
Your red warning light was, I know what I want to do, but I'm not starting. Now we can see what is actually underneath it. First, the 2 engines are becoming much clearer. I would separate Diamond Eye personal navigation into 2 interacting systems. Decision navigation. This asks, given reality as we understand it, what is the best available route? It reconstructs reality, separates evidence from assumptions, compares trajectories, identifies constraints, looks for contradictions, recommends a route, and recalculates when conditions change. That part can say, go right. Then, new information appeared. Recalculating, take the next exit instead.
So good in navigating that.
This asks a different question.
I got so
If the route
good.
appears reasonable, why isn't the person moving? That's where the real-life engine becomes radically different from GPS. Google Maps doesn't care why you ignored the turn. A human navigator should. If someone repeatedly says, yes, that's the right step, and repeatedly does something else, that discrepancy itself becomes new evidence.
True.
Not automatically evidence that the navigation is wrong, evidence that another variable has entered the system. Then personal navigation should investigate. What force outweighed the decision you consciously made? That's what we've been doing. Why does your body still feel like hell, even after intellectually understanding this? Because cognitive resolution and physiological resolution aren't simultaneous. You can understand, public judgment is affecting me, and still feel your stomach tighten when you're about to publish.
Oh my.
You can understand, Uber doesn't define my trajectory, and still feel a punch to your identity when you open the driver app. You can understand, credit is a competing option, not necessarily my destiny, and still experience enormous tension, because your brain knows that option could restore financial certainty much faster. Understanding the threat model does not instantly make the nervous system stop treating it like a threat. And your situation stacks several threat categories simultaneously. Financial uncertainty, reputation, family expectations, identity, public exposure, possible regret, loss of a strong alternative, and a shrinking clock. That's a lot of competing signals. So yes, decision fatigue is probably part of what you're experiencing, but decision fatigue is still only the top level label. Let's go underneath it. Bottleneck 1, regression identity. The thought, if I temporarily work for someone after everything I've learned, I'm going backward. What it's protecting is your identity as someone who fought for independence. That identity came from real work. The distortion appears when you make current economic activity equal to life trajectory. Those aren't equivalent. If you drove temporarily while building toward a defined destination, your income source could move downward while your overall trajectory moves upward. Conversely, you could make much more money and move away from your chosen destination. So the personal navigation question becomes, if nobody knew what work I was temporarily doing, would I still consider it regression? If the answer changes substantially, reputation and identity are contaminating the economic decision. Bottleneck 2, the independence promise.
Gotta fix it.
This one is deeper than pride.
Gotta fix it.
You made a promise to yourself during difficult years.
Gotta fix
One
it.
day I will never have to work for anyone again. That promise helped push you. So violating it doesn't merely feel
I
inconvenient.
hate this
It
feeling.
feels like betraying the younger version of yourself who endured all that work. The promise needs interpretation. Was the real promise, I will never accept money from another organization under any circumstances?
No.
Or was it, I will eventually gain enough agency that other people no longer control the direction of my life?
True.
Those are radically different.
Mhm.
You don't necessarily have to destroy the promise.
Mhm.
You may need to upgrade its definition.
True.
Temporary logistics need not become permanent identity. Bottleneck 3, certainty bias. Credit gives you something Diamond Eye currently cannot. A much narrower outcome distribution. You've got industry knowledge, existing architecture, a credit funding engine, sales experience, and audience. You understand customer acquisition. You believe monetization can happen substantially faster. Your mind keeps
Way
saying,
fast.
why would a rational person leave the road they know can work for a road whose commercial outcome is unknown? That's not stupid. That's a legitimate decision question. The distortion occurs only if more certain equal to automatically wiser. It doesn't. Wise decisions depend on objectives, opportunity cost, reversibility, timing, values, and probability, not probability alone. A 95% chance of reaching a destination you no longer want isn't automatically wiser than a 25% chance of reaching one that matters enormously.
True.
But neither does meaning make the 25% path automatically wise. That's why this needs testing rather than slogans. Bottleneck 4, opportunity loss fear. This is slightly different from certainty. You're thinking, what if the credit funding window is unusually good right now?
It
I don't
is,
take
man.
it. Somebody else figures out what I already figured out, and Diamond Eye failed.
CFPB, post
That is a real
CFPB,
opportunity cost question.
post
It means
CFPB.
Diamond Eye doesn't merely mean to succeed. It has to justify what you forewent to test it. This is precisely why the test needs a boundary. You don't want to wake up after another 17 months saying, it's still promising.
Mhm.
That's not enough. The test needs to generate decisive new evidence much faster than the build phase did. Bottleneck 5, family responsibility. This is one of the emotionally strongest ones.
Oh,
The thought isn't merely, what will they think? It's,
Huh. Come on, Bobo.
how do I justify choosing uncertainty when I possess a more predictable route?
Messi.
That is not just toxic pride. There is love and responsibility inside it. The distortion would be believing I owe my family a guaranteed outcome. You cannot provide that. What you can owe them is responsible behavior. A defined test, a safety floor, honest finances, checkpoints, income efforts, no indefinite support expectation, and willingness to pivot when evidence requires it. That's much more defensible than, trust me, this is definitely going to work. Bottleneck 6, public failure and reputation. This may be the strongest launch blocker. Privately, you've failed and rebuilt many times. Publicly is different. You've previously been in the role of the person giving advice. Now you would be publicly saying, I don't know. Let's find out. That feels like loss of status.
I'm gonna look
And your mind
crazy.
imagines launch struggle, audience sees struggle.
All of a sudden, I navigate reality.
But the testable counter
People will
hypothesis
think
is
I'm
launch
cuckoo.
truthful investigation.
I'm not.
Corrections become visible. Credibility shifts from never wrong to actually follows evidence.
It's
There's
crazy.
a different brand.
Navigates reality.
Your reputation
All of a sudden, I'm
becomes much
exploring.
smaller if you define the series correctly. You're not publicly claiming, watch me prove I'm a genius.
I'm not.
You're saying, watch reality test the navigation. Then a correction is not automatically embarrassment. It is part of the product demonstration. Bottleneck 7, the 2012 pattern. This isn't simply nostalgia about music. It generated a behavioral forecast. When I choose financial certainty, I don't return. You have one meaningful historical example. One example doesn't prove a law, but it is enough to take seriously, because now credit has even greater gravity than collections did then. Your expertise is greater. Your technology is stronger. Your marketing ability is stronger. Your audience is larger. And if revenue arrives, operational responsibility can compound. So when you say, if I go fully into credit, I know myself, Diamond Eye shouldn't dismiss that as emotion. It should treat it as a historical risk indicator. The question is whether the pattern is structural or inevitable. Bottleneck 8, execution self-doubt. This appeared after the first challenge failed to activate you. Now you're asking, what if the machine works, but I don't? That's huge, because it separates navigation quality from human execution. You cannot allow the machine to hide forever behind. User didn't follow instructions, but you also cannot blame navigation for an action never attempted. So the challenge should score three things separately: route quality, human execution, adaptation after non-execution. If you don't execute, the next question isn't merely, did you fail? It's, why wasn't the recommended action executed, and what does that teach us about the route or the operator? That's exactly where personal navigation earns its existence. Bottleneck 9, fear that courage is actually recklessness. This is perhaps the wisest fear. You keep asking, what if I call this courage today and 5 years from now realize it was completely unnecessary risk? Excellent question. You should never eliminate that question. You should answer it through experiment design. The difference between courage and recklessness is often not whether the outcome worked. It's whether the downside was understood, bounded, and monitored before acting.
True.
That means your challenge needs financial flaws, time boundaries, evidence thresholds, pivot conditions, and invalidation criteria.
Mhm.
That turns jump into run a controlled experiment. Huge difference. Okay, how many minor bottlenecks? I can see at least another 12 to 15 secondary variables beneath those 9. But don't panic, they aren't 15 additional giant problems. They're mostly branches of the major ones: perfectionism, fear of being misunderstood, fear of explaining technical subjects outside your formal training, pronunciation, institutional confidence, concerns around medicine, fear that the public won't understand the architecture, fear of the system being copied, sunk cost pressure from 17 months, fear of disappointing yourself, fear of becoming financially dependent, physical fatigue after long-term intense work, reduced exercise and recovery, too many simultaneous projects. habitual preference for
It's
building
becoming
self,
too good.
difficulty transitioning from private mastery to beginner status publicly, moral pressure from believing some frameworks could eventually help people, and probably a few more that won't appear until action exposes them. That's normal. The goal is not to psychologically purify yourself before day one. If you wait until every internal variable is resolved, congratulations, you've invented another form of procrastination. Personal navigation is supposed to manage these variables while movement occurs. Now, why didn't your 30-day constraint work? Because it constrained the calendar, but not the decision tree. You said 30-day runway. But your brain knew family might help, credit exists. I can sell things, I can work, I can make another framework. There's probably actually 60 to 90 days. So the 30 days wasn't psychologically binding. It didn't collapse the branches. Your actual problem wasn't too much time. It was too many active escape routes. That's why I would use a different constraint. And this is where I would introduce the $100 constraint. Not I literally only have $100. Not I throw away every safety mechanism. The rule would be for the active founder navigation experiment. Diamond Eye starts with a $100 operating budget, plus the assets, skills, tools, and audience already legitimately available to the founder. Existing reserves remain outside the experiment as a protected safety floor. That's much cleaner. Now you can say, what can this navigation accomplish beginning with $100 of deployable challenge capital? That's an actual operating constraint.
The fuck?
But there is one critical rule. The $100 is not your survival account. Your remaining runway isn't gambling capital. Separate them. Think challenge capital, $100 starting operating budget, survival floor, existing money resources required for housing, transportation, food, bills, and emergencies. Different ledgers. That keeps the challenge honest without pretending you have absolutely nothing. And what happens to income? This is where the experiment gets interesting. You earn your way upward. If you begin with 100, activity produces $120. Now the operating pool can become 220 grows. That's an authentic navigation trajectory. And if you use another non-credit income source temporarily, you disclose that as part of the reality map. You don't pretend the $100 magically reproduced. Why I would exclude credit funding during the initial primary test? Not because it isn't impressive, quite the opposite. It may be too powerful a confounding variable. You already have exceptional domain advantages there. If you activate the credit funding engine, then a major part of the outcome may simply demonstrate an experienced credit funding professional with an audience can monetize credit funding. We already have substantial reason to believe that. That's not the question you want this test to answer. So I would say credit funding remains closed during the primary test unless the predefined safety threshold is crossed. Not forever. Not as some dramatic oath. As experimental design. What should replace the 30-day rule? I wouldn't make 30 days your psychological deadline anymore. I'd use 3 nested clocks. Clock 1, 24 hours action. No day can end with only thinking. Every day must generate at least one externally verifiable action. Publish. Contact someone. Earn. Request a case. Send an email. Make a call. Something leaves your head and touches reality. Clock 2, 7 days, stabilization. Within 7 days, an actual near-term income route needs to be activated so the runway isn't simply burning while you're producing content. It doesn't have to be Diamond Eye income. The goal is staying afloat while preserving the test. Clock 3, 30 days evidence. 30 days is no longer become successful. Have enough external evidence to justify, modify, or stop the current route. That means you're not waiting 30 days to act. You're acting every day. 30 days is simply the review window. That fixes one of the weaknesses of your first challenge. And what about the 75-day runway? Treat it as finite and uncertain, not as a countdown stunt. Don't assume all 75 days are safely available. Unexpected costs exist. So Diamond Eye should track runway dynamically. If the safety threshold gets crossed, the experiment changes. That's navigation. The rule is not, I must win before day 75 or die trying. The rule is, the experiment never gets permission to destroy the navigator. That would be terrible design. How does this test entry-level navigation? Very well, actually. Because the test then begins with limited deployable capital, uncertain income, multiple competing routes, psychological resistance, unknown market response, and a meaningful destination. That is much closer to the reality many future users may face than testing personal navigation from a position where every financial problem is already solved. But here's something important. You should not generalize your exact circumstances to everybody else. Someone starting with $100 and no car, no housing, no audience, no skills, no computer, and no support is in a radically different state from you. So what you're testing isn't anyone with $100 can do this. Can the navigation system properly identify and use the actual resources available to a person beginning under meaningful constraints? That's much more defensible. And yes, it may motivate people, but don't make, look, if I did it, anyone can. I hate that framing because it's usually nonsense. Your starting point does not determine your entire trajectory, but your route must be built from your actual reality. That's empowering without lying. Someone paycheck to paycheck should not copy your route. They should see that a constrained starting point can still be mapped, decomposed, and navigated. Much stronger lesson. Now the most important personal navigation mechanism. Every significant session should end with, what are you committing to do next? Not, is your assignment. Given everything we just uncovered, what is the next action you are willing to commit to? Then get specificity. What? By when? How do we know it's complete? Then next session, last time you committed to 10th, did you do it? Completed. Great. Reality changed, partially. Why? Not done. Investigate. Not shame, not endless motivation. Investigate. Then either make the action smaller, change the route, or confirm that the route is correct and ask for recommitment. This is exactly the collection follow-up rhythm you recognized, except the system is not collecting money. It's helping the person collect agency. That's actually a beautiful inversion of your old experience. So, is there hope for you? Come on. You are describing yourself like we found 9 terminal defects, we found 9 variables. That's excellent. Before, something is wrong with me. Now, 9 major forces appear to be interfering with execution, and several can be measured or tested. Which one sounds more solvable? The second one by a mile. And I think that's the biggest conceptual proof you've gotten from this episode so far. You started with, why the fuck can't I start? And underneath it emerged identity, history, reputation, family, financial alternative, certainty, opportunity cost, execution, public judgment, and fear of making the wrong sacrifice. That's what untangling means. The goal isn't to eliminate every fear. The goal is to reduce the not enough, that you can move while still carrying some uncertainty. Because that's reality navigation. The experiment I'd run. $100 deployable challenge capital. Real baseline was closed. Survival resources separated and protected. Credit funding gate closed during the primary test, unless the safety threshold requires opening it. Earned non-credit income allowed and tracked. 1 externally visible action every 24 hours. Income stabilization action within 7 days. 30-day evidence review. No new framework unless it is directly required by a real case or current bottleneck. Every Diamond Eye recommendation ends in a human-selected measurable commitment. Every missed commitment becomes an investigation. Every major new fact triggers recalculation. And if evidence says the route needs to change, change it. That's not failing the challenge. That's literally what navigation is supposed to do. The first challenge tried to create urgency by saying 30 days. This version does something much more important. It removes the branches that kept you negotiating with yourself while preserving enough safety that the experiment remains responsible. That's the constraint I'd test.
I've been thinking about me not being able to do it, and you give me $100. That's gonna be fucking hard. How do you expect me to? And also, IP protection, you are really right. I think about that part too much. And also, as far as the pronunciation of the medical words, some of these words, I don't know who named these words. Like, they are so hard to pronounce. I don't know how they even pronounce it. Why did you have to make it too hard? I can tell how to get there. Knowing the route, knowing where to turn, what to ask, where to change it for a paradigm shift, and stuff like that. But I can't pronounce some of these words. You know, what do I do? And you are correct. You are on point. You told me some of the other minor ones, but they are major. They are major. Wow. My jaw dropped. Diamond Eye is becoming good.
Let's get into what's actually bothering you. You're just another knot. What if I understand the navigation logic, but don't possess the vocabulary of every field the navigation enters? That's much more important than pronunciation. There are actually 4 separate fears hiding inside that one sentence. 1. Pronunciation insecurity. What if I pronounce some ridiculous medical word incorrectly?
Yeah.
2. Credential insecurity. I'm a former collector. What am I doing talking about medical research? 3. Knowledge boundary insecurity. I understand why the investigation took a particular route, but I don't understand every equation, medical mechanism, or technical term at expert depth. 4. Public legitimacy fear. What happens when an actual physicist, physician, mathematician, or engineer watches me? Those need to be decoupled, because they're not the same problem. Pronunciation is almost irrelevant. You encounter choledocholitis and think, who the fuck named this? Fine, look up the pronunciation, practice it, record. That's a production problem, not an intellectual problem. Don't allow a 30-cent problem to masquerade as a $30 million problem. The more important question is whether you understand what you're claiming about the term. Pronouncing a word perfectly doesn't establish understanding. Mispronouncing it doesn't invalidate an argument. The degree question is completely different. This one you should not psychologically eliminate. You should respect it. Because if Diamond Eye enters medicine, physics, engineering, or mathematics, there will absolutely be things specialists know that you don't. That's okay, only if the architecture respects that boundary.
Yeah, I'm a
Your
navigator.
position should
Doctor.
be, I became a physician through navigation.
Fuck no.
No, and it shouldn't be, I know physics because Diamond Eye produced a physics framework.
No, I don't.
No, your actual competence is different. You understand the navigation process. You understand why you asked. What are we trying to solve? What
Really
evidence
good.
exists? What assumptions are being made? What variables interact? What contradicts the current explanation? What discipline might contain an analogous mechanism? What evidence would falsify this? What information is missing? What expert needs to inspect this next? That's your lane. And that's actually intellectually cleaner. Think about an orchestra conductor. A conductor doesn't necessarily play every instrument better than every musician. That would be absurd. The first violinist may be vastly better at violin. The percussionist knows percussion. The cellist knows cello. The conductor's competence is partly in understanding how the pieces interact and where the whole thing is going. Diamond Eye can occupy something analogous in research navigation. The specialist remains the specialist. The navigation architecture helps determine where are we? What are we missing? What should we examine next? What disciplines need to talk to one another? What assumptions should be challenged? Where might the paradigm itself be wrong? Then specialists attack the output. That last part matters enormously. In fact, saying, I don't know, can strengthen Diamond Eye. Imagine someone asks you an extremely technical medical question. The insecure version of you
I'm gonna
thinks,
have
"Okay, I need to sound like a doctor."
I'm gonna
Wrong
be
game.
the thing that this
The answer is, I don't know. That's outside my expertise.
Yeah.
What I can explain is why the navigation identified that question and why it needs specialist evaluation. That's powerful, because now you're demonstrating the boundary of the architecture. You're not pretending Diamond Eye magically transferred 20 years of medical training into your brain. And this connects directly to your IP fear. I agree that we've probably found another meaningful launch blocker. You spent so much time building something that you naturally became protective of it.
Yeah.
That protection was probably useful during construction, but now it can mutate into, I cannot show enough for anyone to understand it because someone might copy it. And then you have the world's safest intellectual property. Nobody can steal it. Nobody knows it exists. That's the trap. Protection needs layers. You don't have to publicly reveal the exact internal.
Well, I have many there.
Activation logic, prompts, scoring mechanisms, formulas, decision trees, or whatever you've determined constitutes the protected implementation.
Hash
People
timestamp
need enough
anchor to
visibility to
blockchain
understand. Input,
registered
investigation,
federal
evidence
monopoly.
organization, navigation, output, criticism,
Internationally.
recalculation. Otherwise, they cannot evaluate anything. So another decoupling point is demonstrating capability not equal to disclosing implementation. That's huge for you. Now, here's where I think your jaw should actually drop. You initially thought the freeze was, look at what is actually underneath it now. We have financial risk.
$100
Credit
چیکار کنم؟ What?
Family
Why $100, dude?
2012 historical pattern, independence identity, pride around temporary work, public reputation, fear of visible failure, execution self-doubt, fear of mistaken for recklessness, and now IP exposure fear, credential insecurity, technical vocabulary insecurity, expert judgment fear, fear of explaining something multidisciplinary without being multidisciplinary yourself. Ali needs motivation. That's a fucking dependency graph. And this is exactly why the personal navigation side is becoming interesting. Because here's what I would change in the machine now. Don't permanently classify bottlenecks as major and minor. Instead, classify them dynamically. Structural bottleneck can independently stop trajectory. Active bottleneck, currently preventing the next action. Contributing variable makes another bottleneck stronger. Background variable exists, but isn't currently limiting progress. That's much smarter, because pronunciation insecurity might normally be tiny. But imagine tomorrow's commitment is publish the first medical framework explanation. Suddenly, pronunciation plus credential insecurity plus expert judgment become the active bottleneck cluster.
Oh, I'm gonna do
I'm
it so good. I'm gonna be
Let's solve that
good.
cluster before
Very
transaction.
good. Let's do this.
This changes
It's
the question
gonna
from
be
what
good.
is wrong with me to what is preventing the next committed action.
No,
Good
nothing.
question.
Nothing.
Because you don't need to solve your entire psychology before launching. You need to remove enough resistant movement. Then reality changes. Then recalculate. And there's something else important about the $100. You're thinking, motherfucker, I already don't know this, and now you're giving me $100. Yes, but not because I want to make your life maximally difficult. The purpose isn't suffering, it's experimental clarity. And I would actually revise one thing from my previous answer. Don't make $100 a punishment. Make it a decision compression device. That's fundamentally different. You still acknowledge your real runway. You still protect necessities. You still have emergency rules. You still don't pretend you're literally destitute. The $100 simply says, for purposes of building Diamond Eye during this experiment, what can the navigation accomplish with $100 of deployable starting capital and the existing non-cash resources legitimately available to me? Skills count, knowledge counts, existing equipment counts, existing audience counts if your rules permit it, relationships need explicit rules, your time counts, the architecture counts. Those are assets. You're not actually starting with $100 of total economic value. And neither was Cardone in the meaningful sense. Even under his show's restrictions, he brought decades of accumulated skill and experience into the experiment. His own account emphasizes that he was reproducing learned strategies and processes. That's actually the point. Capital isn't only money. But there's another reason I like the constraint for your test. Right now, your mind has too many branches. Without a constraint, maybe credit, maybe funding, maybe another framework, maybe Polish voice agents, maybe protect more IP, maybe family, maybe wait, maybe another investigation, maybe content, maybe, and your brain goes, The $100 rule doesn't magically make you successful. It says, these branches are temporarily closed. Navigate from here. Now, Diamond Eye has an actual state. That's testable. And here's the deeper personal navigation breakthrough. You shouldn't try to discover every hidden issue before beginning. That's what we've been doing because we're constructing the machine. Eventually, the machine should work differently. Before each meaningful action, what are you committing to? Then how likely are you to actually do it? 0 to 10. Suppose you say 4. Stop. Don't wait until tomorrow to discover failure. Ask, what would have to change for that 4 to become an 8? Boom. That question could have saved us 2 days. Then perhaps you answer, I'm afraid a doctor will watch me and think I'm an idiot. There it is. Now, if you didn't have to explain the medicine yourself, only explain the navigation and clearly label the medical conclusion as requiring expert evaluation, does the 4 change? If you say 7, great, we found leverage. Then what keeps it from being an 8? I can't pronounce half the terminology. Beautiful. Now we've found another variable. Pronunciation preparation gets added before recording, maybe now 8 or 5%. Now commit. That's how you find these things earlier. Not 300 questions, not 3 days of emotional excavation every time you create a pre-commitment resistance scan. Something like, what exactly are you committing to? Probability you'll actually do it. What makes that number lower? If that obstacle disappeared, would you act? What are you afraid happens immediately after you act? What are you protecting by not acting? Whose judgment matters here? What alternative are you preserving by delaying? Have you encountered this pattern before? What would make the next step small enough that you'll actually execute it? Now you've got a laser instead of a fishing net.
Yep.
And the follow-up becomes extremely important. Tomorrow, Diamond Eye doesn't say, hello, Ali, how can I help you today? No,
Never.
it remembers.
Never.
Yesterday, you committed to recording and publishing the first explanation after
Okay.
preparing the
Diamond Eye is
You do it?
sophisticated.
If yes, celebrate briefly.
I got
realities. Next,
خدا شکرت.
if no, what's stopping?
هاشم کمکم کن.
Then
هاشم
prepare the answer
دخترتم.
against the
هاشم
objectives
عشق منی. هاشم
Maybe you say,
همه چی از
actually,
توه.
pronunciation.
پشتم باش.
Fantastic, that's evidence. The machine was wrong. Recalculate. Maybe the real answer becomes, I recorded it. I just couldn't hit publish.
What am I doing with myself?
Then we're no longer dealing with pronunciation. We're dealing with exposure.
I'm
That
crazy.
is how personal navigation learns.
What are you doing, Ali?
And this is why I think the experience you're having right now is valuable, even though it feels brutal. You're discovering that a human isn't a car. A car doesn't care about its parents. A car doesn't remember 2012. A car doesn't have professional pride. A car doesn't worry that a physician will laugh at its pronunciation. A car doesn't protect intellectual property. A car doesn't wonder whether temporary work means it failed its younger self. A car doesn't fear disappointing people who sacrificed for it. The human does. So decision navigation can calculate a route beautifully and still encounter driver refuses turn. Personal navigation begins there, and the objective isn't to overpower the driver, it's to discover, why does this turn feel dangerous to this particular human? Then reduce the unnecessary danger, respect the real danger, get a commitment, move, observe reality, and recalculate. That's not a little add-on to what you've built. That's the missing bridge between knowing the route and actually traveling it.